Still?
Just going to record it.
It's fine. Okay. Sorry. Okay. In Siman Kuf Peivo, which we're learning now, Seif, when we talk Seif Beis, Seif Gimel, Alter Rebbe, Rebbe Rashab, and a little bit from Tzemach Tzedek. The Siman general talks about Bdika before and after Tashmish, to ascertain whether there's going to be a Chashash of Re'eh Machmas Tashmish, which we already learned in Siman Kuf Pei Zayin. We learned that first, because some of the topics that are going to be discussed now are really relevant to what's going to be there. So you understand the Chashash, now you understand why you have to do the Bdikas. We'll discuss a woman who does not have a Veses Kavua. Sif Beis, the Shulchan Aruch says that a woman who does not have a Veses Kavua, so the first 3 times she has to do a Bdika before and after. He has to do his own Bdika, and she has to do her own Bdika. And if those 3 times they don't see any blood, then she's huchzak that she's not Re'eh Machmas Tashmish, and she never has to do a Bdika again. That is what the Mechaber writes. Then the Mechaber continues and says, but according to the Rambam and the Rosh, there is no such a chazaka. Rather, as long as she doesn't have Veses Kavua, she has to do Bdika before and after, and she has to, and the Rambam says even he has to. That is what the Mechaber brings. The 2 shittas, well, it's 2 groups of shittas. There's one main shitta which is missing, which that's what we're going to be discussing a lot of it today. And then the Ramo adds on to it and says, even according to the Rambam, they don't have to do a bdika after every time, if it's on the same night. Rather, they mekanchim atzmum kol halayla, and the next be'ed, and the next day they have to do a bdika. And if she finds blood then she's tummy. Now, if she did kincha atzmum be'ed and she lost it, she can't continue until she does a bdika, because she doesn't have a Veses Kavua. That is all Shittas Harambam. There are a few Nekudas over here that have to be discussed. We're going to go through them in the Alter Rebbe first, and then we'll go in the order the Rebbe Rashab and the Tzemach Tzedek the Rebbe Rashab brings. First, why does this woman need to do a bdika? Why do we have a woman that does not have a Veses Kavua? Why does she have to do 3 bdikas? Simple question. Why does she have to do these 3 bdikas? Before we get into who holds what, why does she have to do these 3 bdikas? So the Alter Rebbe right away explains to you, it brings from the Ramban, and then the Ran who adds on to the Ramban, that when a woman has a specific day, she has a Veses Achoider, she has a specific day where she sees blood, or she has a Veses Aguf, that she has a specific thing that comes, and that's how she knows she has a Veses. So we know, and she feels that the blood is going to come, so she knows when the blood is coming. She knows what is going to bring about the blood. If it's Veses Aguf, she knows a specific movement in her body. If it's Veses Achoider, she knows that's the movement of the sun or the movement of the moon, like we discussed when we learned Kuf Pei Gimel, Kuf Pei Daled. But this woman doesn't have Veses Kavua, not a Veses Hayim, not Veses Achoider, not a Veses Aguf. So we don't know what brings about the blood. We have no idea. And we're chayshish that maybe, in the beginning, maybe Tashmish is going to cause about the coming of the blood. That is what the Ramban writes. The Ran adds on to it. What does that mean that we're chayshish? Maybe she's going to see Machmas Tashmish. That being that we know now, we see that her re'iyas are not based upon a specific schedule or a specific thing in the body. Rather, it's things that happen, something causes it to come. So maybe also, maybe Tashmish is also going to be one of those mikrim which is going to bring about the blood, and therefore she needs bdika 3 times before and after, and that's why she needs a bdika, to ascertain that there is no issue of machmas Tashmish. And now Alter Rebbe concludes by bringing the Prisha, and okay, so that would answer why you need bdikas achar Tashmish. If you know that if you chayshish maybe something is going to come, then why do you need the bdika before? You don't need the bdika afterwards. Afterwards you see, and then you'll know. You see if it came because of Tashmish, then you make a bdika afterwards. Before it's not going to help you anything. So he says, Migu, the tzricha bdika achar Tashmish, tzricha nami bdika lifnei Tashmish. Yes, like she needs because she needs one after, she also needs one before. That's the explanation of why she needs the 3 bdikas. The explanation of the shitta of the first shitta in the mechaber. Basically, she doesn't need before, really she only needs after. Being that she needs after, we also require before. The reason is because we are worried maybe something external is causing it, because we don't know, there's no veses kavua, so we don't know what causes it, so maybe it's machmas tashmish, maybe not. Therefore, she has to do these bdikas. When,
The one before would be mevar if there's down that it's not machmas tashmish type of thing?
There'll be a period, something else, we don't know. We'll get to it. When does she have to do it? Achar tashmish. The Alter Rebbe writes miyad, right away. Obviously, she has to do it right away to see why she does it. Now, that is the shitta of the first shitta. They have the shitta of the Rambam and the Rosh. And the Alter Rebbe discusses it in Sif Zayin, where the Alter Rebbe says, according to the Rambam, if she lost the aid, why can't she be Meshamesh until she does a bdika? He explains that even though you're not supposed to, there's a head hetiru not to be with even without checking the bdika. It's only when the aid is existing, and then you could go check it the next day. But when it's lost, it's as if there was no bdika at all, and she has to do another bdika, and then she has put it aside, and then she checks it. But if she does not lose it, she doesn't have to do any bdika. Why? Because it's enough for the second time. This is talking about the second time in the night. Because she already did the bdika la'achar tashmish after the first one. That one counts as the beginning, as the one before for the second one. And you're done. And why does she have to do 2 times in a row? She did one after the first tashmish. She doesn't have to do one before the second tashmish. That counts as before. It counts for both. That is the shit of Taisvis. Right away, one after another. And even though she doesn't check it until the next day, it still helps for that one. However, that only works for bdika la'achar tashmish, does not work for the bdika לפני tashmish, according to those shittas, that you do have to check la'ir haneir. Now, the reason why the Ramah is not chayshish to this, the Alter Rebbe explains, very simple. He says, according to Rashi and Tosfos, and this is the third shitta which is not bechlal brought in the Shulchan Aruch, she bechlal doesn't need to do any bdikas, not before, not after. Because we're not discussing tumah v'tahara, any seconds v'taharis, she does not have to do these bdikas at all. Ba'atzim, according to Rashi and Tosfos. You have the shittas the Rishonim that you have to do 3 times, and you have the shittas the Rambam and the Rosh that you have to do before and after. But the shittas of the Rashi and Tosfos, which is the original explanation of the Gemara, you don't need Bechlal. So the Ramah Bechlal is not worried about this whole thing, because for him, just remember there are shittas which say that it's Bechlal not needed. Elamai, so why does he bring it? It's good, it's important to be chayshish to the day of the Rambam and the Rosh, and that's why you do it. Now, according to the Rambam, the reason why you need to do bdikas ve'en v'eses the whole time is because he doesn't hold this differentiation. This the Gemara is talking about taharis. He says talking about being with her husband, not with taharis. And even according to the Rambam, you still don't have to do bdika until the next day. And what's the reason? Me'acha sherashi v'toisves v'siyatom mekilim legamrei. Yeah, being that the Ramah is not so worried about this, that you don't have to check it right away, because ultimately, like we said before, the Rashi and Tosfos are bechlal mekel, with siyatom. So I'm going to find out who the siyatom is. And the only reason the Shulchan Aruch is very important to remember, the only reason the Shulchan Aruch brings the day of the Rambam and the Rosh is because, the Alter Rebbe adds, El sheroi lebal nefesh lochush ledaitom. Because even though the halacha is not like them, Roi lebal nefesh should be machmir like them. But still, no, but the ikar the halacha is like the first svara. And therefore, being that the ikar is kisvar rishayna, that the first 3 bdikas are חיוב, And only according to the Shittah of the Rambam and the Rosh, it's only for a Baal Nefesh. And the Shittah of Rashi and Teisus is Bechlal not mentioned. So therefore, the first 3 bdikas, which is the first Shittah, the Stam and the Mechaber, that you can't be Mekel without checking the Bdika L'Oir Haner. Now, the Alter Rebbe then put something the next part, the Shach Kosev, the Shach mentions that the Rif is like Rashi and Teisus. There's a whole discussion, this whole argument between the whole team which holds that you need 3 before and after, the first 3 times. And is all based on understanding the Rif. The Shach disagrees with them, says, they didn't get the Rif. The Rif really holds like Rashi and Teisus that you don't need anything. Even if she does not have a Veses Kavua, she does not need any Bdika whatsoever. Not him, not her, I feel begin to Rishonim. And the Shach concludes, Kamedume Shekain Amodavar. And the Shach says, and it seems like that's how the minig is accepted. The time of the Shach that was accepted, you don't even do these 3 bdikas at all. And based on then, the Mishnah Yaakov also adds to it that if Mokim Shenagu Lahokel, you could be Mekel. But if the Mokim does not have this minig to be Mekel, then you can't be Mekel against the Shulchan Aruch. That is all the important Nekudas that are relevant to Sif Beis, which we're going to analyze soon a little bit more in depth. Come Sif Gimel, and just the point, because this is also going to be discussed in passing what the Rebbe Rashab mentions. If a woman never sees less than 14 days, her periods always come 14 or more days after mikveh, then she is considered during those 14 days as a woman that has a Veses Kavua, and therefore she does not have to do bdikas during those days, even according to the Rambam, and that also would mean that during those days, the 3 bdikas of Ein Leveses don't really work. What does that mean? That that's like a woman, she Yesh Leveses, that even though the Alter Rebbe right away explains to you in Sifches, that even though the Kol Dinei Vestes and Nikra Veses Kavua, even though this concept of a minimum amount of days is not considered Veses Kavua for any other topic in Shulchan Aruch, unless you have a specific day to see it, Mikol Mokayim, when it comes to Bdika before and after, you could be Mekel more, and you could limit these days and put these days as clean days. Why? Because some shit is a Bechal Mekel, you don't need all these 3 Bdikas, and which is the shit of Rashi and Teisus. That is the summary of Shulchan Aruch and Alter Rebbe. There is a whole Mahalach from the Rebbe Rashab on this topic. Mahalach from the Rebbe Rashab is printed in 2 places. We have 2 letters from the Rebbe Rashab, which were printed in Igris Kodesh, Chelik Aleph, Siman Chaf and Chaf Aleph. Then afterwards they were printed, and when they redid the Rebbe Rashab's Ksavim and Halacha, it came up in the Shas Tshuvas Torah Sholom, Siman Mem Vav Mem Zayin, which is in this white book, not the booklet, not what I gave you today, the white book. In the white book, page 339 in my numbers. You have 2. So we'll go start with that first. And we'll go back and forth. You'll soon find out. No, I'm about to explain. So there's three letters in the topic. There's a letter we call Simon and Vav, discusses the topic, some elements of the topic. That was written to the Radat Schein, who was a Rav in Chernigov, Lubavitch Rav. And it might be that this letter was never concluded. This was in Chav Gimel Adar. 10 days later, the Rebbe Rashab wrote another one, Be'inyan Hanal, and this was not written to the Radat Schein, but this was written probably to Reb Sholom Zalman Naimark, because he's the one who responded to the Rebbe Rashab on it, which is printed right after Simon Zayin. Not long ago, they uploaded all the Kisvei Yad to the Rebbe's library, and over there they found another part, another Ma'adura of it. And that Ma'adura is what you see in this booklet, which you're going to get. There's no need to go through it now. I only printed it so you have it for your reference, because probably you don't have it over there. Huh?
This is printed in English.
No. That's the Igris that was printed now. It's a Renegade edition. It's not the official one. It says...
That's why they wrote loin with the vav.
Yeah. That's, I marked it on top. It was a mistake. That's the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote, Chas Chuvas Bilchis Nide. Why did I print it for you? Because one of the questions that the Rebbe Rashab discusses in short in his letters, over here it's very long. He discusses only that question. The Rebbe Rashab doesn't understand the shit of the Rif. He asks on the Rif, and that's what I printed in this booklet. That letter. But we're not going to get to it now. First, going to focus on what's in the white book before we get to the booklet. So that's two letters. It's two letters, and the letters reference the Tzemach Tzedek's, which I printed over here, which for some reason I forgot to put them in the book. But we'll first start with the book, Simon and Vav, page 339. The story is as follows. There's a woman who does not have a Veses Kavua. She's married for a long time. She does not have a Veses Kavua. Sometimes she sees after 23 days, sometimes she sees 27 days, sometimes she sees after 40 days. And then she doesn't have a Zman Kavua Bichlal. Usually before the Veses, she starts feeling a headache, etc. And the Rebbe Rashab adds, obviously she's Choyshesh to Yom HaChodesh, V'es HaChodesh, and Benenis, and Veses HaFloga. The last Veses was 42 days. Now came the 40th day to her Re'iyah. Now, because the last Veses was 42 days, the one before that was 40. So because the last one was 42, so the Veses HaFloga, it cleared, it was longer. It passed, day 40 passed with Tahara. So then came day 40, she was with her husband. The moment the husband finished, she felt something wet. She cleaned herself with her robe and she saw blood. Same thing, the husband also wiped himself and he also saw blood. Then, sometime afterwards, short time after, she did a full bdike, and she did not find any blood. All she found was some kind of marek. A marek which the Rebbe Rashab says probably if a Rav would see it, he would say it's kosher. Now, she's also wipes herself, her minhag to wipe herself before she goes with her husband. And this time also, she wiped herself. She didn't do a bdika. She wiped herself before, it was 10 minutes before. Afterwards, she was with her husband. Then she wiped afterwards and she saw a little bit of blood. Then she did a bdika and she did not see blood. 2-3 hours later, after she was with her husband, the vessel started. And the next morning, she found... on her underclothing, she found blood. And she says, even though she had a little bit of a headache, but she didn't think that's going to bring the period. Why? She didn't sleep normally the 2 nights before. So maybe that was the headache. Also, she was sad. And she was very sad that day, so she didn't think that it was connected to the period. She wasn't worried. She thought maybe it's because she didn't sleep normally, so she had this headache. And the Rebbe Rashav's questions, he forwarded to the Rabbanimar. First of all, somebody's anus. If they're anusim, they don't need kapara. If they did it something completely wrong, they need kapara. Maybe one does and one doesn't. Is it a shoygig? Is it what exactly is the issue over here? And is there a chashash that there was roya machmas tashmish? Right? Because she saw blood right afterwards. Did the tashmish cause the blood to come?
But the bdika shalachar tashmish came out clean.
The bdika, but the wiping not. The wiping came out with blood. And then the Rebbe Rashab goes and says, this is on page 340. He divides it into the woman needs a kapara, does the man need a kapara, and that's what these two letters are all about. But to understand whether the woman needs a kapara or not, you first have to analyze this whole idea of whether a woman needs a bdika before tashmish or not. So he starts by bringing the Shulchan Aruch, which we just discussed. that the Shulchan Aruch says if she doesn't have Vesses Kavua, she needs a bdika 3 times before and after. That's in Dibra Maschil, Hine Imaisha Tzicha Kapare. And afterwards she needs before and after 3 times she does not need any more. This woman is married for a long time. Who is this according to? This is according to the Shitta of the Ramban. It is according to the Shitta of the Ramban and the Rashba, the way they understood the Rif. Not like the Rambam and the Rosh, that they hold that you always need a bdika before and after. And the reason for it we saw in the Alter Rebbe, the explanation is whether it has to do with Baal Nefesh or not. Yeah, according to the Ramban and the Rashba in understanding the Rif, this requirement of doing bdikas past 3 times is only to a Baal Nefesh. Only to a Baal Nefesh. The Alter Rebbe clearly paskins not like the Alter Rebbe clearly in Sifkot and Zayin, which we saw, he says halacha kistam. He does not paskin like the Rambam and the Rosh, but he does mention the idea of a Baal Nefesh. So what is this Baal Nefesh all about? The Rebbe Rashab takes a break from this discussion and he goes into the Baal Nefesh, and then we're going to go afterwards. The Alter Rebbe discusses Baal Nefesh in both places, and the next letter he adds a little bit to it. He says, why bichlal does it oil the Baal Nefesh lachush? Why does the Alter Rebbe bring that the Baal Nefesh has to be chayshish to the das of the Rambam and the Rosh? L'cha'ire, this is completely against the simple understanding of the Gemara. Over there in the Gemara it's mashma that even the Baal Nefesh doesn't have to be machmer. So the Rebbe Rashab comes and tells you what the roi the Baal Nefesh lahachmer doesn't mean that she has to do bdikas. What it means, it's connected to something which we learned in Siman Kuf Pei Daled, that in Siman Kuf Pei Daled exactly, Siman Kuf Pei Daled in the first seif where it talks about that you have to be poirish from a isha shishla veses, or a woman that does have veses kavua, you have to be poirish din of prisha before the time of the veses kavua. And over there the Alter Rebbe says that what's the reason why she does bdika if she has a veses kavua. The Shulchan Aruch says kol isha shishla veses kavua ba'ala shel b'shas vestem and tzircha bdika lifnei tashmish. V'gam, she doesn't have to do a bdika before, lifnei v'achre, when she has a veses kavua and it's not the time. Shlo yihei liboy noikfoy u'poirish. Why? Because if he's going to see that she's doing bdikas, he's going to be poirish, he's going to be worried about it. So the Alter Rebbe over there in Siman Kuf Pei Daled and Sifkot and Gimel explains why poirish. Because he sees his wife is doing bdikas, he's going to get worried, he's going to be poirish. And he knows Chachamim didn't say that you have to do bdika. He's going to see she's doing a bdika, he's going to be poirish. But the Alter Rebbe brings in the name of the Goyis Maimonides, Goyis Mordechai Avo Kol Adam Rashai Lahachmir Al Atzmoi. Rashai, a person has a right Lahachmir Al Atzmoi, to be machmir on himself, to tell his wife to do a bdika before tashmish. Why? Because then, if he tells her to do it, then he's not going to have the issue of liboy noikfoy. But afterwards, she doesn't have to do a bdika afterwards. Why? Because then he's going to go back to liboy noikfoy. If he's going to find blood, he's going to be worried that maybe he caused it. And he's going to go back to the liboy noikfoy issue. Back to the liboy noikfoy issue. So based on this, the Rebbe Rashab says that when it says Roy le Baal Nefesh in Siman Kuf Pei Vav, it's referring to this. It doesn't mean Roy le Baal Nefesh lahachmir to be choishish always to the Shitta of the Rambam and the Rosh and always to do bdika. Rather, there's a right to the husband to tell his wife, if he wants it, that she should do a bdika. She should do bdikas. But over here in Siman Kuf Pei Daled, it's talking about only bdika lifnei. It says you don't do dafka, not to do bdika la'achrei. So the Rebbe Rashab explains, no. In Siman Kuf Pei Daled is talking about a woman that has a veses kavua. So that's why we don't say that the Baal Nefesh doesn't have to be miyachman to do bdika afterwards. But over here we're talking about a woman that does not have a veses kavua. It's the same idea. If a person wants to be Baal Nefesh, wants to be Machmer L'Tzavah, he says Ishtoi, So being that we're talking about a woman who doesn't have Vesas Kavua, and the shit of the Rambam is before and after, so therefore, Tzavas is Ishtay to do before and after. Now the Rebbe Rashab comes and asks you a
general child that's bothering me.
Yeah.
There's Kolel Shulchan Aruch, and all the Kollel, the Svarim that are written on Kollel, say clearly that when you have a machlokes between, first the Beis Yosef made his Shulchan Aruch based on the Rosh and the Rambam and the Rif.
Yeah.
And he says that you pass them, if you have all three, you pass them like that. 2 out of 3, you pass them like the 2. So over here, the first sheet is the Rif, and the next 2 is the Rambam and the Rosh. So we should be paskening like the second shita, not l'chumra.
Okay, so that's actually, I think it's not directly answered over here, but the idea is there that be'etzem even the Rosh and the Rishonim all really hold like Rashi, and only that they're worried for other shittas. But be'etzem they all hold like Rashi. Most of them hold like Rashi. So that's what comes now. There comes the Rebbe Rashab, and it's going to be answered in this. He says, Bichlal, he doesn't understand this whole idea. That starts in V'gam kosher. Lomo tachshish b'tchila shemo tireh machmas tashmish. Why does Bichlal she have to have a chashash, and she has to do a bdika before being with her husband, even once, she has to have a chashash. Maybe she's going to see machmas tashmish. So yes, you have what the Alter Rebbe brings in the name of the Ran, that being that she does not have any form of Vesas Kavua, so we have to be choishesh. Maybe it's going to come al yidei mikriyim. So maybe Roya Machmas Tashmish is one of the mikriyim. So if that is the idea, why isn't she choishesh every time before kefetzes? If it's a mikriyim, kefetzes is also mikriyim. So therefore, she should do a bdika before every time she jumps, or before the first 3 times she jumps, before and after, to see if it's going to bring about. If that is the idea, because of mikriyim, the first 3 times of any form of mikriyim, achilas shum, he brings kefetzes, but it applies to everything. All the examples of mikriyim, she also do bdika before and after, the first 3 times. Why suddenly Roya Machmas Tashmish she do a bdika before and after? It's clear that by kefetzes we don't do it. So the logic would say probably because Roya Machmas Tashmish is more common than Roya Machmas kefetzes. Why is that? We learned in Kuf Pei Zayin, could be because the Aver gets close to the Makir, or because Oivia Aver, depending on the shittis over there. And he says, still more than kfitza. But the Lashon of the Ran that the Alter Rebbe brings doesn't fit with that idea, because the Lashon of the Ran that was mentioned in Siman Kuf Pei Vav that the Alter Rebbe brings, he adds one word. The Ran says a specific word, and the word is af. Also tashmish, similar to kfitzas v'achilas, which means according to the Ran, it's the same as the other one. So we're back to the question: why do you bichlal need these bdikas for something which is completely not expected? So then the Rebbe Rashab tries bringing rayas. The first raya the Rebbe Rashab brings is because in Vesas akvitzos we say clearly that you're not choishesh if she that in Vesas akvitzos if she does 3 times without and it's not kavua and she sees blood, it's nekar with 1 time. It's nekar with 1 time. And where do we see this? It's also written in the Ole Yosef, which you have in the back of your book, Rishume Kitzurei Psakim that he learned from the Alter Rebbe, and over there it's on page 408 in your book. If you want to, I'll show you where it is. I'm not going to read it now, but on page 408 in this white book, you have the Ole Yosef, which is the Talmud of the Tzemach Tzedek, and there's something called Rishumei kitzurei psakim kolelim besvaris ve'inyanim mishulchan aruch admur hilchis nida mehapnim u'mikuntas achren. The first thing he discusses is, I'm not going to go through it now, but the first thing, yeah, and he explains it. So from that it seems that, and it explains if she does 3 times without keva, without 3 times kvitza, and it's not a kavua, it's nekar pamachas. And now, but you're going to say, reimach mastash is also nekar pamachas if you do bdika sheferes. So what's the difference? The Alter Rebbe clearly writes of bdika sheferes that the reason why is nekar b'pa'amachas is because ein lo takana liyas in baila. There is no other way to figure out how to solve this problem. So therefore, with one time, with a bdika sheferes, she is clean. But it's only like a solution, a cool solution. Otherwise, she's stuck without her husband, whatever. But be'etzem, it would be stricter. It's mashma from the fact that Alter Rebbe writes that only because she can't be with her husband, there's no other way. So we did this. By kfitzes, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that. So obviously, it looks like machmas tashmish is stricter. Then the Rebbe Rashab goes for the next 2 pages, din kofta v'rasa, and he goes into discussion Siman Kuf Pei Zayin. I think I mentioned it in the Shiur when I did Siman Kuf Pei Zayin. I'm not going to get into it now. I'm jumping to page 343, where you have Oid Raya. Continues another Raya that Raya Machmas Tashmish is stricter than Kfitze. Why? Because when it comes to Kfitze, it seems like, from the Alter Rebbe, that if she did 1 Kfitze, if she saw 1 time Machmas Kfitze, she's bichlal not chayshish to it. And it's mashma from the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe in Sifkot 9 Beis and Siman Kuf Pei Tes, and the Rebbe Shab brings it here. Chazra v'kafza tzricha b'dika chulu kim shosagim p'mim adik fitza v'chein ma shekosav achagav v'gam kodim she'elo ken gimel pa'amim miyad shekofza pa'machas v'asa tzricha lochul shlo yisiyem b'chodesh. Which seems that for a kfitze, you b'chlal not choishish until 3 times. And that's clear that it's because bichlal not choishish to it. But by Reya Machmas Tashmish, the way that it's the Alter Rebbe explains that the only reason why we're not choishish after 1 time is otherwise we might be choishish. So the fact is that we're much more choishish in Reya Machmas Tashmish. So it seems like Reya Machmas Tashmish is more common or more chamor than Reya Machmas Kvitza. Mikol Malkaim, still in all, the Rebbe Rashab says, okay, granted, it's more chomer, and therefore we are choishish 3 times. We still have a big question. Why do you have to do bdika before? Even if you're going to say that it's a chashash, and it's a serious chashash, more chashash than kfitze, we never have any place that we see that you have a chashash, you're going to do a bdika before. Now, why do you have to do bdika before? Before a chashash even becomes a reality, why do you have to be chayshish? And he says, and then he goes into discussion about the Siddha Tahara. Siddha Tahara says Reya Machmas Tashmish is stricter than Veses Aguf, and he doesn't know where he got it from. The Rebbe Rashab says he doesn't know where the Siddha Tahara got it from. And then the Rebbe Rashab also explains it's not comparable to Leda. And then he asks a question on the Rif. And he says, Apiko, now ain't no move on. He asks a question on the Rif. The questions on the Rif, by the way, are explained much better in what was found in the Ksav recently. That's in that one, I printed it for you. You can review it when you have time. The Rebbe Rashab explains over there the Kash and the Rif much better. But the Rebbe Rashab concludes this letter. I don't know if this letter was finally concluded or not. The Rebbe Rashab concludes, after all, I don't understand the shit of the Rif, that you have to be choishish meikare, that maybe you can see machmas tashmish, that you don't have to be choishish in any other ones. And why? And from the other side, why do you need it? She has to do 3 times. She has to be muchzik 3 times. That is the first letter. the second letter, which was written 10 days later, it's written to somebody else, says that it goes into what does a woman need a kapara or not, and a short, very brief description of the case, and then he says that according to Shulchan Aruch you only need 3 times, according to the Rambam and the Rosh, that is based on the pirush of the Rach in Gemara. It's only for a Baal Nefesh, and only a Baal Nefesh you have to follow the Rambam and the Rosh. But the Iker Kisvara Rishayna, like the Alter Rebbe writes, that you paskin like the Svara Rishayna in the Shulchan Aruch, that is the Shitta of the Rif, that you don't need, the Shitta of the Ramban and the Rashba and the Rif, that you don't need more than 3 times.
So why isn't she Kolel? So she shouldn't be a Kolel?
That's the question. That's the question. Why does the Bechal need the Bdika before? There's no chashash of anything before. Why do you have the first Bdika before? So you have the answer, Migu, but it's not such a strong answer. It still doesn't answer why do you choshesh to it before it starts.
Migu is for the Bdika before Tashmish.
Yeah.
Why to do Milchat before she's royal Nachmas Tashmish? The question is about the one after.
Question, yeah. Why do you have to be, it's a whole thing. Before, you have double question. Before you even have huh?
You do one after, you do one before.
Yeah, but the whole question is why do you have to do bdikas before one time she's Rei Machmas Tashmish? No other chashash do we have such a thing that you do bdika before. So here the Rebbe Rashab starts and says, Be'emes, apirush yosim ruv gemara apirush Rashi. Be'emes, if you want to take the clearest, cleanest, and simplest explanation of the Gemara, is Shitas Rashi. Shitas Rashi, that separates, as when it talks about the bdikas before and after, it's talking about letaharis, but lebaila, it doesn't need bdika at all, even she has no vesses kavua. And he says it's clear that this is how all the Rishonim understood. Tosfos, Rashba, Sefer HaTruma, the Rekeach, HaGodol, the Smag, the Ravid, some of them even paskin like that lahalacha. Elamai, the Ramban and the Rosh didn't want to go against the Rif. Huh? The Ramban and the Rashba didn't go against the Rif. Didn't want to go against the Rif. And he's medayik, that's how it looks. The Ramban didn't want to go against the Rif. They weren't comfortable going against the Rif. So therefore they said, okay, fine, we'll be machmer like the Rif for the 3 times. And the Rosh didn't want to be cholik on the Rach, but nobody Bechal follows the Rach, none of them. He's the only one. All of them Bechal were Meschashav in the Rach, only in the Rif. And he adds the Lashon of the Rebbe Rashav here in explaining it, is Venire, in the middle of paragraph of Be'emes HaPirush on page 346, Venire Heitev, Shedas Atzmam Noite Yoysa HaPirush Rashi. Seems from the reading the Rishonim that Be'etzim, their Shitta is like Rashi. Elamai, the Ramban had to be doichek to Mefarsh according to the Rif, like the Ran explains it. And therefore is why the Shach Be'etzim paskin that if you don't have a minig, you don't have to do it at all. Now the Rebbe Shah brings as a side thing, he says, and that's how the Tzemach Tzedek paskined in his Chidushim on Mishnayos. That's in the beginning of this one that I gave you. That's this booklet. You have a Tzemach Tzedek on Mishnayos, and that's where it says Mishnah Daled. It's called Noshim Becheskas Tahara Lebalei, and he brings the Shitta of Rashi, he discusses the whole sugya. He brings towards the bottom of the page, he says because of B'siyosef das Rashi Sevatrum Smak das Rashi the Kolel by Bdika fil ein verses bein kedim tashmish ben lacher tashmish Sefer HaTruma hoyser da fil firach yishlif se kerashi yeah we shall say from halach achar hamekel and next page we come harba moiroim mekilim Elamai mikol mokim the Rif holds that again permission tzirich leave the kachat tashmish and achat tashmish the Rif says. The cost of Yosef adds that in those 3 times you also have to do before. The Ramah Bechlal says, ain't word of Nirim. And even the Shitta, what the Ran says, the Tamla Divrei Arif, Sherei Yisrael Bois Lamachmas Amikrim Chulu. Yeah, he says, even when I follow that Shitta, still no, the Tzemach Tzedek says you have to make a differentiation between before and after. Now the Tzemach Tzedek says, so the Fizeh yesh lachalik ben lachar tashmish and lifnei tashmish. Kach has been V'im kein hoyos yishaper the masin kol nosh cheskes tahare af begimel palma rishonim das cheskes tahare that really she does not need bdika at all, even without the vessels. V'kevan de belav hochi, concludes this paragraph. Kevan de belav hochi hashach pirish divrei harif gam kim be'inyan acher. The hashach bechlal understands the rif to follow Rashi. Al kein bebdika de lifnei tashmish, not la'achar, nire lehokel af begimel pomim harishonim, kepashat masnisin. Even according to the rif, and even according to the Shulchan Aruch, the 3 before is not the same as the 3 after. Even that, you could be, it seems like you could be mekel. It doesn't pass like that halacha, but it seems like it doesn't pass in the kan lakan, it's chidushim. But he says, it's near that you could be mekel, that those 3 could be mekel more than the 3 after. So it's, the Rebbe Rashab brings it here. He brings the kosher, what the Rashba asks in it, he brings it, and that's what the Tzemach Tzedek over here, and that's what he brings the shit of the Tzemach Tzedek. And therefore the Rebbe Rashab says that being that the Tzemach Tzedek was mekel in the first 3, the Fizet, this is at the bottom of page 346 in the book, being that the Tzemach Tzedek was mekel even in the first 3 times, and the way the Tzemach Tzedek understands before, and Rashi Bechlal was mekel even the first 3 times, and even according to all the other Rishonim who understand the Rif, except for the Ramban and the Rashba, even according to the Rif, you don't need the bdika. But according to the Poskim which understand the Rif, you need the Rif is only the first 3 times. Therefore, he says, be'etzem, in this case, the woman is no since she doesn't need kapara. Now he goes into the Baal Nefesh thing. Yeah, and he says, and because he says, Bifrat, he concludes in top of page 347, Bifrat, Lefi says she anusa, the fact is they're married for 10 years. If there was Rei Machmas Tashmish, she would have known about it already. She was Huchzika that she's not Rei Machmas Tashmish, even if you don't know if she ever did these 3 b'dikas. The thing is, we don't know for sure she ever did it when she got married. 10 years she's married, she doesn't have Rei Machmas Tashmish, she's Huchzika by the mere fact that she's 10 years without it. And Bifrat, the way the Tzemach Tzedek says that even the first 3 times, you could be mekel in the b'dika before. Comes the Baal Nefesh. The Alter Rebbe brings the idea that the Baal Nefesh should be machmer like the Rambam and the Rosh. That's not enough to make this person a shoygig that he should need kapara. And then he goes and asks again the same question that was discussed in the previous letter. Be'emes ma shekosuv sheroi l'Baal Nefesh chul tzarich iyun. Yeah, why? It doesn't make sense why she would bechlal need b'dika. And he explains over here, Lochi Nireli, in the same, in this page 347, the same in the middle of Perek Mishum. Lochi Nireli, the same he explains the other place. Hakavana sheroi lebal nefesh lochush ledaitam uletzavis leishto shetiv dekatzma koin rash v'achat tashmish. Wasn't a shaykh liben nekfei. Then you have the issue of liben nekfei, like the Alter Rebbe discusses in Siman Kuf Pei Daled. But now, what happens over there in Siman Kuf Pei Daled? It's only before tashmish, it only says before, you don't need after. Over there, yesh leimer dehainu dafka beyesh leveses. Over there, it's talking about yesh leveses. Aber in leveses roi lehachmir, it's roi lehachmir tzavis v'livdik. Then the Rebbe Rashab over here adds something that's not in the previous letter. Avol ha'isha mitzad atzma, osur lo lehachmir v'livdik. Unless the husband comes and tells her, I want you to follow the shit of the Rashba and the shit of the Rosh and the Rambam, the woman on her own accord, osur lo lehachmir. Prohibited for her to decide to do this on her own, to be machmir b'dikas before and after for past the first 3 times. Even though b'sefer Eliyosef it's lo mashma kain. Then he goes back into the discussion about who needs kapara over here. And when you have to do the b'dika afterwards, what time you have to do the b'dika afterwards. Because the whole discussion, the Behuda says that she doesn't have, if she doesn't, it's a oinus, it's not a oinus. If she doesn't have a vessel and she didn't do a b'dika, it's not a oinus, it's considered, it needs, and she needs a kapara. And he says, when she does. And then the Rebbe Rashab does not agree with this idea of the Behuda that in general, when you don't, if you decide to follow the Shulchan Aruch and not the Baal Nefesh, Rambam and Rosh, you have to do kapara. And he goes the whole discussion whether she needs kapara, whether she doesn't need kapara. And then he says on page 349, there's another svara, maybe she does need kapara because her head was heavy, and even though she didn't sleep. Maybe Teva Atzvus, it says a person is sad, she was sad, and this Teva Atzvus goyim kovid aguf, is eirus kol nerven shebaguf. Still in all, it's we could say that it's not like we still know it's not enough to say that she needs a kapara. Especially she says that when she gets a cold, she gets a headache. When she doesn't sleep, she gets a headache. And not always does she feel this headache and tiredness and everything before Vesas. So she didn't have any reason to worry that it might be a Vesas. Also, what it says that she found a kesem on the Michnasayim is still not enough to say that she will need a bdika. Next morning, yeah, but still would not mean that retroactively she should have looked at her pants and she found the kesem and she took off before she went to sleep.
Right, but it's quite dark. So.
Yeah, was it? She still that's not enough. We're trying to see did she have any chiyuv dika? Still not enough to do a chiyuv dika. Yeah, and then the Rebbe Rashab on the bottom of page 349 he says the fact that she felt some kind of moisture, she felt that the blood is starting to move when she separated, when she left her husband. This means that it happens that she felt it after tashmish. Why? Because she didn't have a real ergasha. She felt moisture coming out. She didn't sham in a shayach ergasha. It's not ergasha. And even though the Tzemach Tzedek says that ergasha tachtis bais achitz is also called ergasha, the raya that he brings doesn't seem like a strong raya. From another tshuva, it seems like he also doesn't hold like that. Maybe it was bichlal hargoshas sham. She felt it because of the beer, and she felt it. Maybe it was a period. It wasn't machmas tashmish. It came before. And definitely not machmas tashmish, very simple. The fact that he checked himself and he saw blood on him also is a raya that it came before, that it wasn't at the moment of her ergasha. She says after she separates from her husband, she starts feeling blood coming out. The fact is the husband had blood on him. So the husband had blood on him. Obviously it came before. And the ergasha is not a real ergasha. And, מה? כן, לא הרגישה. Yeah, and then he goes into a different discussion. Maybe the kinuach that she wiped herself before the being with her husband counts as a bdika koydem. Maybe that counts as a bdika koydem. So he says, no, this happened 10 minutes before. 10 minutes before, it's too long. Before tashmish. Maybe it's not enough. We know that for bdika afterwards is miyad. For bdika before it doesn't say anything, right? But maybe it's not enough. So the Rebbe Rashab says, "Lanius daiti eina dover poshut kol kach the bdika the lifnei tashmish." Even according to those that hold that it's a חיוב, im tzrich ali somoch tashmish davka kam dume lo nizkar b'shum mokoim shiur al. No real discussion if the bdika before has to be right away, only about the bdika afterwards. There's a discussion how long the bdika should stay. There's a discussion of the bdika afterwards, but there is no discussion how long before the bdika has to happen. B'shiur, like the last line on page 350, b'shiur azman smichas abdika lifnei tashmish lo yis b'shum makom shemedabrim mizeh. Yeah, so do we consider it? And he says maybe the reason is because of even according to Svara, the reason is so she should know if it's the calculus baila, the chayra should have been right before. Still in all, he says according to the shita of the concludes in page 351, according to the shita of the Ramban and Rashba, that the be'etzem, you don't need a bdika, you only machmir, like the Rif, and that shit is only because you choishish of rei machmas tashmish, maybe because of mikrim. And that would be really a חיוב bdika only afterwards. And because of חיוב bdika afterwards, Migo, you also do a bdika before. That's not enough to say that it has to be the moment right before. It's not really a חיוב. But that's only according to the Rif and the Rambam and the Rashba. But according to the Rach and the Rambam, and also the Rosh, the way he looks at it, that a woman always needs bdika, the Cha'ira, the bdika before, has to be right away. It's Medina. It's bdika Medina. The Cha'ira should be. So l'chayra has to be samuch dafka, and he says no. The fact is, he says towards the bottom of this page 351, mikol makoim mideloi hevi shum poisek shir bozeh yesh loimar me'achar shurak chumra yetzem maskane me'achar shurak chumra lachush chulu ha'ikrak is varishayna shebeshulchan aruch loy medaikinan kol kach shetiyeh samuch chulu. The Rambam also didn't give a shir to it. What's the raya that the Rambam didn't give a shir to it? So next page 352, the second paragraph. The Rambam is that we saw in passing when a person is twice in the same night. If you do a bdika before the second time, the bdika after the first time is accounted for the second time also. So in Taisvus, it seems like the bdika for the first time, the only time it counts for the second time, the Taisvus says the lashon of miyad. So from Taisvus, mashma, maybe it's not. Maybe you would need, if it's a חיוב bdika, you would need a second one miyad. Before, if it's a long time. But the Rambam says it bestam, doesn't mention the word miyad. The Rambam just says that if it's 2 times in one night, the one after the first one is enough for the second one also. So it's mashma from the Rambam also that there is no specific share of time how long before the second, how long before it will still count as a bdika. Yeah. Now, what's the reason why? But this all again, this is all according to the Rambam and the halacha we follow the Alter Rebbe paskins like. Chaber paskins like the shittas that you only need 3 times, and the Alter Rebbe says that halacha is like that. And the Baal Nefesh, the Rebbe Shabbos explains what Baal Nefesh means. It's only that the husband, if he wants, can tell her, and the wife is not allowed to do it on her own. And what's the reason why this whole thing is bichlal like such a question? According to Rashi, bichlal you don't need anything, even vesas she'eina kavua, no vesas kavua. According to the Rif, 3 times you need to. Why is that? Yisoid hadavar, the Rebbe Rashab explains, page 353, Yisoid hadavar is the Isha becheskas tahara oimedas. A woman has inherent cheskas tahara. V'lochein, therefore, be'emes svira l'churur roi v'apoiskim harishonim ve'achreinim shel ba'ala ein tzircha b'dika klal. B'chlal, you don't need a b'dika. Ve'af lefi das Rif ikra b'dika lachat tashmish dafka. According to the Rif, it's only afterwards, not before. Like the Rambam writes, and the reason is because Riyaseh bois lefi mikrim. So maybe you would need it. But be'etzim you don't, it's only a chashash, it only work for after, you only need it for after. For before you anyways don't need. Even according to the Rambam, you still have to say that there is the cheskas tahara between before and after. According to the Rambam, that you have that he holds it's Medina before, it's Medina after, whenever she doesn't have a vesas kavua, the bdika achat tashmish is to see if it's remach mas tashmish. And that bdika, if she would see blood, she would lose a cheskas tahara, become remach mas tashmish. But the bdika before, if she sees blood, she doesn't lose her general cheskas tahara. It's a mikra. She become tamei. But she doesn't lose her general cheskas tahara relevant to that. And therefore, we're not so machmir, and the fact that she did a kinuach before should be enough that she doesn't need kapara. Levat kol zeh, in addition to all of this, bichlal when it comes to the bdika, the Alter Rebbe brings in the name of the Minchas Yaakov, and the same similar to the Shach, in a place where Nagula Hakel Yesham Mashi Smeichu. They could rely on it. And now the Alter Rebbe, that the Rebbe Shach brings another Tzemach Tzedek, which is also in this booklet which I gave you today, the next page. It's Chidushim al Rambam. Here. Halacha Yud Zayin. Also, he takes the same approach as the Shach and as the Mishnas Yaakov and Alter Rebbe. He writes in a small paragraph on that page of the Chidushim. You right did that one, yeah, this one, bigger letters in this booklet. The one page after what we did at Tzemach Tzedek before, the next page. He says, Halacha Yud Zayin in the second column. Fima shekosafti leil das Shulchan Aruch din ze noeg beisha she'ein lo veses lebal nefesh achoishes das Rambam v'kach kosev Rama Shom. This is what the Rambam writes, only for the Baal Nefesh. I'll begin upon Rishonim, Ein Lahakel B'dikas Eid Lo Yiraneir. Yeah, Basuka B'Tahar is the Miguchul, and the only reason you have to do it is only Harav Simen Kufra V'Sikon Zeh. V'shach Mekel Oid B'Yoyse Ayin Shom. V'heichi de Noog Kedaitoi, Noog, Magoshin Minog Ein Lahakel K'moshin Elok Moshin Yisbar. Yeah, Mishnas Yaakov and Harav is Alter Rebbe. So he says he also the Tzemach Tzedek also takes that approach. If you know to be mekel, you mekel. So therefore, what does that have to do with here? How do you know if the noeg to be mekel or not noeg to be mekel? So he tells you, Lefi daiti, the fourth line in paragraph Divrei Matzcho Levad in page 53. Lefi daiti, b'mashe nogu anoshim. The woman have a minig. Al pi mashe posku lohem rabbonim ugoinim. Moisrim achas lachaverta. Each woman teaches the next friend in the name of the Rabbanim, what they heard. Anything which a woman hears from her, she's very careful. If one woman doesn't tell the next generation something, obviously there's no minute. Based on this, the fact that she didn't do a bdika is not enough to make her a shegeges. And not only that, he writes a piece of the feet daiti nira she'ein lehachmin l'tzavas l'mashiv b'dikut. Don't even come and tell them, teach them a new thing now. They should have to start doing bdika before and after. Whatever they keep is good enough. Don't be machmer them more. Fact is, that's what she was taught. Don't change what she was taught. She's not going to anyways do it, create problems. No, better not even say anything. So now we're done with the woman. She doesn't need kapara. What about the husband? Does he need kapara? So he says, brings from Abushi Tahare that the Baal is always a shoygig. And he always needs kapara. And he says that it's Be'etzim the Raya that he brings from it's on page 354, Be'etzim the Raya that he brings from the Rambam is not a good enough Raya. And it's not considered, it's not such a good enough Raya. And when you look at the Kesef Mishnah over there, the Rambam over there says, the Lashon of the Rambam, you'll see in the bottom of page Pevav, page 354, in He'orem Memches, the Rambam writes, Abba Lishte Shloi B'Shas Vesta, V'ras Adam B'Shas Tashmish, Hare Elu P'turin, Mikor B'Nchatan, V'Zeke Anus Hu, V'Loi Shoygig. Yeah, and the Kesef Mishnah writes, this is it's the Anus only when she did a B'dike before Tashmish, because the Rambam holds that it's a Xiuv. Yeah, but that's according to them. But that's only when there's a chiyuv to do a b'dika. That's when you have to do. That's when you could say that the person is a shoygig, and if you didn't do the b'dika. But if there's no chiyuv to do a b'dika, then you're anus. And then.
But it's Kolel B'Shas Vesta, so why does she have to make a b'dika?
According to the Rambam, if she has